Tip, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel, leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Care. I'm here with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste, brother.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, once again to where truth and real talk occurs. We have so much information to discuss. Let's go right into it. As is customary, and as all of you know, we like to get into a few historical pieces. First on the agenda is the Crown Heights Rebellion, which happened on August 21st, 1991. Those you may remember as a young child named Calvin Guyger, African-American, was struck by a vehicle. And then the community wasn't satisfied with how the ambulance service responded, catered to the Jewish driver that was involved in the vehicle accident. Meanwhile, the young man, Calvin Guyger, ultimately died. There was days, if not a couple of weeks, of riots on both communities, members of the Hasidic community, members of the African-American community. Michael, why don't you give us a brief update of this particular incident?
Yes, from the 19th through 21st, as you pointed out, there was unrest for 3 consecutive days. What we have to remember in this, the tragedy of it all is that what's lost in this story when mainstream media does it is that Gavin Cato was killed.
Facts.
And they seem to somehow switch the narrative, and it's all about Blacks attacking the Jewish community, which is not true. What happened was, as you pointed out, there was a motorcade, and the motorcade came through with Rabbi Sneerson, who was the leader of that community. Now, when it came through, the driver was inebriated. They had just came from some ceremony. He had been drinking. His car went up the sidewalk. He ran a red light. He was speeding. So that's several violations. He ran a red light. He was speeding. He ran up the sidewalk. Ran into Gavin Cato, who was playing with his cousin. Gavin Cato was 5 or 6 years old. Ran up the sidewalk, and that's when Black men tried to get Gavin Cato from under the car. Police got involved in it by trying to stop them from lifting up the car, but they were trying to save a human life, Gavin Cato, as well as his cousin, who was 5 or 6 also. So this is why things broke out, because when the Jewish ambulance came, the Jewish ambulance paid no attention to Gavin Cato or the youth cousin that was hurt also, but addressed the Jewish people there who were not hurt. So this was just contempt on top of contempt by Blacks. So that's how things that's the sparks of what really happened. And the police did not arrest the driver of the car. Later on, automatics with Reverend Sharpton went to Israel to track him down. But in any event, over a 3-day period, there was unrest. Later, the Jewish community called it a pogrom when Giuliani was running against Dinkins. And so things was exploited to the detriment of David Dinkins, but the Black community was absolutely in the principal position by trying to help Gavin Cato, and those who tried to prevent them were absolutely wrong and out of order.
Right, and as you stated, a couple of points, the driver of the vehicle, he was attempting to catch up. There was an escort, he was attempting to catch up.
That's correct.
Many of us in law enforcement know that he didn't have the authority to go through a red light, especially in a densely populated community such as that. So there was some culpability on his part, and he should have been charged criminally for going through the red light, being involved in the accident as a result, and causing the death of an innocent pedestrian. In this case, it was a child. Real quickly, Michael, could you also mention there was a member of the Hasidic community that was killed, and the individual was arrested. Was it Nelson?
Yeah, Limerick Nelson.
Right, Limerick Nelson was arrested, and
Limerick Nelson was arrested for allegedly killing a young man. He was exonerated in state court, and then Congressperson Schumer, I believe, was the one that pushed the feds before he was a U.S. senator. I think he was a congressman at the time. He pushed to have Limerick Nelson rearrested again and charged by the feds, which they did. And in this particular case, now the Black attorney who was successful in defending Limerick Nelson on the state level was not allowed to defend him in the federal case. Authorities, have these backdoor meetings, and they told him, they were straight to the point. They told him, if you defend Limerick Nelson a second time, what's gonna happen to you is what happened to Automatics. We're gonna take your license. And in New York, it's always been, you only get one big case. And then after that, they're gonna have a talk, and they're gonna talk to you about your legal practices, and so he was given the choice of defending Limerick Nelson a second time or backing out of the case and allow the others who actually gave Limerick Nelson to the system. They allowed him to come in there with a black leather coat, black turtleneck, black hat, black pants, looking like Shaft, because it was all part of getting him convicted. And they did not fin him the way that the original attorney would have. And that's part of the story that's never told, that he was not allowed to defend Limerick Nelson that second time.
Right, and the individual who was killed name was Yankel
Rosenbaum.
Right.
Yankel Rosenbaum.
Right, but what I wanted to point out, which you actually covered, is that our brother Nelson was vindicated in state court, found, he wasn't convicted in state court, and the Hasidic community was so outraged, they appealed to the feds. Fine. I just wanted to point out how many cases did African Americans, members of the African American community, appeal to the federal government for redress when we didn't get a prosecution or a conviction in the lower court, by local state prosecutors. And how many times we appeal to the federal government and they pretend to be investigating, like, the murder of our sister, Sandra Bland, and they pretend to be considering prosecuting these cases, they never do. So the Hasidic community is 1,000% when they appeal to the federal government for intervention. And in our community, the successful rate has to be maybe 0.01%, something like that.
Yes.
But our second case is on August 21st, 1831. August 21st must be a very important date. Is the start of Nat Turner rebellion.
Yes, in Virginia, you got to have a start somewhere. And Nat Turner plotted and planned, saw a vision. God gave him a vision. And in that vision, he saw Black spirits fighting white spirits, and saw actually blood in the streets. And to sum it all up, God gave him the spirit to fight and be a warrior for our people. Consequently, Nat Turner, who whites sometimes describe as being crazy out of his mind, fought for our people, plotted the proper time, organized our people, and was able to successfully free himself and many others. And down the line, before actually federal troops came in, was able to successfully free quite a few people along the way to freedom, until the National Guard, or what they were then a state militia was organized for his capture. But it shook up Virginia so much that they considered even dropping slavery or a way to amend it, because they could not take many more Nat Turners. So long live the spirit of Nat Turner, an angel of God that fought for our people.
All right. Next historical point on August 17, 1887, there was an incident in Houston, I believe it was, Michael, where the white militia, who I believe you mentioned earlier, called himself White Lives Matter, surrounded the NAACP headquarters with weapons. Michael.
Yes, this was various armed militias from all over Texas. They combined that day. So instead of one group getting all the credit for their unification, they just called themselves for that day White Lives Matter. These are all serious, bloodthirsty, armed to the teeth military personnel. They had fully automatic weapons, so much so that the use of force, they was able to successfully surround the NAACP headquarters in Texas. And in surrounding it, dared any of them to come out and demanded that they condemn the actions of Black organizations, and they dared them to come out of the building. The NAACP would not dare come out of that building. Consequently, the Houston Police Department had to literally beg and negotiate with this militia group, who was armed to the teeth, mind you, beg them to allow the members of the NAACP, they had a large staff in there, as well as their president and others, asked the militia to please let them go home. This is the Houston Police Department didn't demand that they immediately withdraw from that area, or else they didn't give them that kind of ultimatum. They asked them to please let the NAACP members go home that night. And it was negotiated peacefully. They would not have been as peaceful, and it would have been a national issue had Blacks did that to a white organization, whether it was civil rights or whatever they was doing, animal rights. If Blacks surrounded a building like that, Houston Police Department, which is heavy-handed and no nonsense, would not have negotiated.
Facts. And that happened 8/21/1916. Now, last historical.
No, 2016.
2016?
2016, okay. 5 years ago.
Oh, okay, 2016. I mean, I thought you was talking about something ancient.
No. It would look better if it was ancient, but guess what? It was just 5 years ago. Them guys are all still around. They still training and they ready.
Okay, the last piece, 1887, the birthday of the great Messiah Marcus Garvey.
Yeah, well, what can you say about Marcus Garvey? In the pantheon of great ones, just to mention his name, you're in rarefied air. I would say that he might have been the most important Black man we birthed in the last few hundred years. He's there with anybody. Certainly, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him so much credit for the progress and elevation of the Black man. The Nation of Islam reveres and respects the work of Marcus Garvey. All civil rights organizations should. NAACP was against that man, and you pointed out many times that they were actually the counterweight to what Marcus Garvey was preaching and doing. And some luminaries in our history actually played a role in him being arrested and deported.
And the thing about Marcus Garvey, you know, when so many people ask what is the solution for Black African Americans to get out of the situation that we are in this country, you know, you don't have to remake anything. Marcus Garvey had the key, he had the solutions, he had the plan, he had the organization, he had the strategy. And if we implemented it today, I believe our communities will be much better than they are now. You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, may peace be upon him, ultimately adopted Marcus Garvey's strategy and solution, but he put a Islamic twist on it. That was the only thing that made it different. But even Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, you know, he Whenever he had a mosque, he built a school. You know, they had their restaurants. You know, they had their ships where they bought their own fish, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we need to study the program of Marcus Garvey if we're serious about getting out of the situation that we are in, which to date, in my humble opinion, you know, shows that we are not really serious. But anyway, yeah,
well,
go ahead.
I'll just say that Marcus Garvey, he raised the important questions. He said, where's the black man's army?
Facts.
Well, he developed one. He said, where's the black man's Navy? Where's the Air Force? Where are they nursing corps? Where are our doctors and engineers? Well, he developed all that and brought all of them under the tent. It was a big tent. He also did things like what you said, a school. He also raised a very important thing. He said, where's the black man's flag? And he gave us a flag that exists to this day, the red, black, and green. That is the flag of Marcus Garvey, casually called the Liberation Flag, the flag of Black America. It is the flag of all Black people all over the world, red, black, and green.
Right. And it is interesting to note also, he wasn't anti-anything, he was just pro-Black. All right, let's rush into some current stories. We want to do some finishing up. We want to first talk about Amber Guyger, who was a young police officer who had murdered the African-American male, Michael. It's reported that she made an appeal for release. Why don't you update us on that story?
Yeah, Amber Guyger's lawyers argued in front of a three-panel of judges in the appeals court that her case was unjust. She was unjustly convicted of the murder of Botham Jean. Well, it was examined, and out of those judges, Chief Justice Robert Burns said that the evidence is undisputed of your intent, because her lawyers raised that the element of intent was not there for her murder conviction. And she said she mistakenly went into the wrong apartment. Therefore, you can't convict her of intent because she didn't intend on killing Botham Jean because she thought she was in her apartment. Well, the Chief Justice said the evidence is overwhelming because he went by her statement saying that, first of all, a person from their academy admitted that once you knew that you were no longer in your apartment, you should have sought cover. And then either call for backup, or since you was off duty, back up out of the apartment. Now, her words were that really convicted her. The Supreme Court Justice Burns quoted that she said that once she realized that and saw a silhouette, she intended to kill him. She said she shot to kill. So he said, by your words, you admitted that you intended on killing him, because she said that under testimony, she said, I shot to kill. So it was no retreat in her. It was no, oops, I made a mistake. She claimed she saw a silhouette and took the silhouette down. She said she shot to kill. So for her to say that there was no intent involved, there was intent. And the judge just said that the evidence is overwhelming and that it's undeniable. Now, we know full well she was banging on the door. Why are you banging on your own door? Why are you screaming to open up the door? Unless you know that there's somebody in that apartment that you want to see and that's not giving you entrance. She initially lied and said that the door was open, that the door was ajar. Let me say it right. The door was ajar. The door cannot be ajar because it's a security type fireproof door where the door is either open or it's closed. It can't remain ajar. It's gonna slam shut. So she was caught in too many lies. And she tried to claim at one point that her key was able to open his door, which is also a lie. So the evidence was overwhelming that she didn't have a leg to stand on. Consequently, she, by the judge's admission that she was guilty, the evidence was overwhelming. She tried to say that the 10 years was too much, but for the intent being there and for what she did, she got off lucky with the 10 years that the judge convicted her of, and she's only going to do probably 6 years because she was convicted in 2018. She's eligible for parole in 2024. So she's only going to do 6 years for killing a human being, going into his apartment and shooting him in a callous fashion, and the nerve to try to appeal it, saying there was no intent there when there was.
Right. All right. So, fortunately, she'll do the at least a full 6 years as opposed to getting out early. All right. Another story that we talked about here at Community Cop, not only recently but years ago, is the New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announcing that he planned to step down. Here at Community Cop, we gave a historical account of how we believe Governor Andrew Cuomo has conspired with others to manipulate or coerce then Governor David Patterson not to run to be elected New York State governor. And we classified, or at least I coined, Andrew's Cuomo's situation as chicken come home to roost. Well, this week, David Patterson, for the first time, we learned, made some comments as it relates to what Andrew Cuomo was going through. Michael, why don't you update us on the comments made by former Governor David Patterson?
Well, let me say from the outset that I must commend you for what you did, Noel. You early on suspected, you smelled the rat. So your bloodhound ability, your ability to make sense out of nonsense and to do some deductive reasoning all came to the fore in this process. Now, what had happened was in 2006, Eliot Spitzer was looking for a running mate and was making considerations as to who Andrew Cuomo, who was running for state attorney general at that time, found out that Eliot Spitzer was close to picking David Patterson, who was a state senator, as his running mate. Andrew Cuomo, believe this or not, calls Spitzer and tells him, let me quote David Patterson's words. He said, I was always leery of him because he called Eliot Spitzer and said, if you consider David Patterson, you find out that David Patterson is erratic, he's disloyal, and things will come out that will make you wish you never chose him as a running mate. Now, doesn't that sound similar to what happened literally 4 years later?
Thanks.
Salacious stories. Now, I don't know how you knew to this day, Noel, that this was coming from the Attorney General's office, but you knew it. I told you, no, Noel, you probably, just, it's a quantum leap. You looking too far, but you were steadfast in your belief. And brother, let me just commend you that you were right. It was coming from the Attorney General. We didn't know that in 2006, it had already begun his plans on being the next governor. So he was already putting a story in Eliot Spitzer's ear about salacious details. He's erratic, he's disloyal, and saying, man, there's things about him that's gonna make you embarrassed, man, that you picked him. So that was out in 2006. So in 2010, ergo, your past events show your future events.
Right.
So what did he do? Put out stories about David Patterson so that he would not run again, and really tried to get him to step down. He tried to say sexual allegations about, supply room activity. He was having sex in the supply room in his office, that he was doing things with the GW Bridge, going across that for rendezvous, sexual rendezvous. And he mentioned drugs. He did everything under the sun to castigate David Patterson. And so which shows you there's no unity in the Democratic Party. It's dog eat dog. So he did that. And as you aptly put it, this is the chickens coming home to roost, that now the very pot that he was stirring up for somebody else, he found himself in that same pot.
And it was easy, Michael, and I know you commended me, but it's very easy, and based on all of our conversations, whenever you see these kind of instances occurring, and not only what happened to David Patterson, but what's happening throughout the world, sometimes you just have to sit back and see if, when things don't look right, who's going to benefit over what's happening. And, it wasn't far-fetched to know that, at that time, New York State Attorney General Andrew Cuomo, he had previously wanted to run for governor, and he challenged with the Democratic leader at the time. What's the brother's name? Carl McCall.
Carl McCall, yeah.
All the Democrats throughout the state stated that he should run for governor, and Andrew Cuomo was upset. And
that's right.
He challenged him initially. He made some subtle racist comments or planted some racist seeds and wound up backfiring on him. So when David Patterson was governor, because of what happened with Spitzer, I know that Andrew Cuomo snapped his finger and said, "Oh man, he doesn't want to wait for 2 more terms or 8 more years for his shot at being governor." So when I heard these conspiracies, these salacious accusations against David Patterson, who, by the way, all of them was unproven, he never was convicted or never had any trial or anything. All of these allegations dissipated exactly after he agreed not to run for governor. They stopped.
And also,
all the newspapers in New York City stopped covering him in that manner. There was no mention of these so-called allegations. As soon as he mentioned that he would allow rabbits to control the New York State budget and something else they wanted, and that he wouldn't run for governor, all of this stopped. So, it was easy to figure out that when David Patterson announced that he wouldn't run for governor, and we found out that Andrew Cuomo announced that he was running for governor, it was easy for me to deduct where all of this was coming from. A closing comment.
And we had information, brother, that Reverend Sharpton had organized Black elected officials all over the city, so-called community leaders, and put out the word that David Patterson's got to go. This was done by supposedly a friend. Reverend Sharpton supposed to be friends with David Patterson, but he was taking direct orders from Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo had a Black stable of Black leaders and told them what to do without hesitation. He was in command, and he gave the order. And when the order went down to Sharpton to organize that dinner at Sylvia's restaurant, they were all there. They were organized, and that's why we beat them to the punch. When we saw that they was organized for that night, we went early that day and exposed them that they were going to do a thumbs down on Patterson, which embarrassed them. They never saw it coming. And the Attorney General's office wanted us to pull back our support for Patterson and promised us that they would stop question and frisk if we pull back our support for Patterson.
Right. And they asked us not to do it. Right. We were just about to do a press conference. We got phone calls asking us not to do the press conference and coming out, because I'm pretty sure they seen our press release and they knew what we were talking about. And as you stated, Michael, that meeting that Reverend Sharpton organized at Sylvia Restaurant, the question was, should David Patterson step down? And if you're a supporter of David Patterson, you don't ask that question. If you meet, you say we're coming together to support him.
Yes.
And if during the discussion some issues come up, then the issues come up and you discuss and you debate them. But when you have as an agenda the idea or the suggestion, should he step down, that kind of shows that you're not really in support of him as a lot of people think you are. And as you stated, Michael, at that particular meeting at Sylvia's was the who politically in Black New York City and Black New York State. So
right. How do you even raise a question about Albany being unmanageable? That question has never been raised by Black elected officials with any governor in New York State history. Right. How do now, when you have the first Black governor in the state, how do now, out of nowhere, you agree that Albany is now unmanageable? David Patterson is a good guy, a real nice person. He's always had an open door policy as a state senator, and as the governor, he was always a down-to-earth, beautiful human being. And we always had a good relationship. We, meaning 100 Blacks in law enforcement who care, has always had a good relationship with David Patterson, and we respect him and love the man to this day. So I'm glad that he finally came out and said that he was always leery of Cuomo, which means he knew, because when he challenged Cuomo in 2006, Elliot Spitzer told him that he's saying such and such about you. He went to Cuomo and asked him, why'd you say that? He said that Cuomo act dumbfounded, like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. It's not surprising. And to confirm our idea about that particular meeting, I believe Peter, Noel, Michael, and David Dinkins were at the meeting. They were kind of surprised at the direction of the conversation and some of the comments that were made.
That's right. That's right. David Dinkins is David Patterson's godfather, and he went there to support him. So he went there and said, do not do the thumbs down on his godson, because he said, give him another chance.
All right. Okay. Fast forward to today. Those of you who are listening to the news today, it was announced that the Biden administration plans to announce that, or if they didn't do it already, that a third booster shot is necessary for all vaccinated individuals in order to give them further protection against the coronavirus. Some of you may remember here on Community Cop that we discussed in April, the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, said a booster shot would be necessary for those who have taken 2 doses of his vaccine, his company's vaccine. Dr. Fauci and American government officials were upset at Pfizer CEO for making that public announcement. They thought that he should have discussed that issue with them. We criticize Dr. Fauci and the government for trying to be so secretive about this particular vaccine and all the information as to whether or not it's how successful it really is and the percentages of people who are really getting sick. But today, as we predicted, once again, we're not prophets, we predicted a third booster is now being stated is necessary. Now, initially, some of you may remember that they announced about a week ago that just a few days ago, that a booster shot was necessary for people with compromised immune system. They said those with compromised immune system have a weaker presence from 2 doses. So they relegated the booster shot just to people with compromised immune system. Now they're announcing that everyone should get the third booster shot. And the question that's not being raised was, okay, if you're saying that people with compromised immune system need it because they have a compromised immune system, what makes the dose weaker inside of them, then now people without immune system, what's the explanation for them? So my point is that they come up with a new explanation, every day, every other day. Fauci said that, if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. Now they saying vaccinated and unvaccinated wear masks. Fauci one time said people who are fully vaccinated become a dead end for the virus. In other words, they can't, pass it on. It dies. It becomes into the body of a vaccinated person. Now we find out that that's not true, that they carry the same amount of the virus in their nostrils as unvaccinated people. So, these conflicting, contradictory positions, one time stated by government officials. Initially, they said only 2 doses was necessary. Now, in less than 6 or 7 months, they saying a booster shot is necessary. Is another shot going to be necessary in 6 or 8 more months? And this is why I'm so sensitive as it relates to people who are vaccinated being so dogmatic and their demand that everyone take the vaccine. There's still a lot of questions, legitimate questions, and I'm not talking about those who have these, far-fetched issues, but there's individuals that have some legitimate concerns about this particular vaccine. Now, according to many, it has saved lives and stopped some from being hospitalized. But do we know that people who are vaccinated do get sick, do go to the hospital, and some are dying, even if the percentage is very low? The question is, or the issue is, that there's still a whole lot of questions as it relates to this particular vaccine. Now, their admittance that a booster shot is now necessary, they're even tapering, that particular announcement in terms of why is it necessary? I mean, is the first 2 shots wasn't good? When did they find out that the first 2 shots weren't good? Are the first people who've taken the first 2 shots in 8 months, is it weakened in their body? Is it not as strong as it was? Is in 8 more months, are we going to need, people going to need a 4th booster shot? These are the questions and issues that are not being raised and are being overlooked. And so, Michael, what is your thoughts on the announcement today that everyone, initially it was just people with compromised immune system, and I believe when they made that announcement, they knew that everybody ultimately was going to need a booster shot, but they're, putting this information out toward the public, at bits at a time, is what's raising a whole lot of suspicion about their being totally honest with the public.
Well, certainly, and I concur so much with what you're saying. This was not a traditional vaccine. This is something that was actually concocted and conspired years ago, at least 20 years ago. There you had Fauci as well as Bill Gates conspiring with governmental agencies to mass produce a serum that would counter a disease that they were developing. So they were developing this disease in the lab, and eventually, without going through a long thing, it ended up in Wuhan, but it started here. Certainly, if you get the Irritated Genie's DVD, Ayo Kamanthi, the Irritated Genie, has a wonderful documentary on COVID-19. So everybody should get that DVD, and you find out information that you're not aware of. Even the activist Kennedy from the Kennedy family, he talked about how governmental agencies and Gates and others conspired with Fauci and started having these diseases developed in laboratories, and how eventually how some of the animals they used escaped and got out, and how they were trying to develop diseases that can transfer from animals to human beings. So all these things were being done, and actually President Obama shut it down at one time. And I'm trying to remember, in 09 or like in 2014, I think it's around that time, somewhere between 2012 and 2014, Obama had it shut down temporarily, and this is why they shifted it to Wuhan. So it's a man-made disease. It has been taken from animals, and they had to find a way to pass that on to human beings. Gates wants to reduce the population of the planet from 8 billion to about 2 billion. Consequently, these are measures, and they making a boatload of money. Gates and Fauci and so many others, they're turning millions of dollars investment into billions of dollars. And that's what it's all about, the dollars and the reduction of the planet.
And we'll continue to update our family on the particulars, or give our point of view on the particulars. And like I said, my greatest concern is I don't believe the authorities are as forthcoming with information, all information as it relates to this particular vaccine, and the good and the bad. And that's what the people who have legitimate concerns about this vaccination are asking. They have some legitimate concerns as it relates to any information regarding long-term effects of this particular vaccine. Are there any negative long-term effects? No one knows. How long the vaccine actually lasts in your body? No one knows. Whether or not we're going to, the public is going to need 4, 5, 6, 7 booster shots. No one knows. These are legitimate concerns. And as you stated, Michael, this mRNA vaccine is a new vaccine, never been distributed to as many individuals as it is. It's not a validated vaccine as of yet, even though some suspect it's going to receive a federal validation in September. But up to this point, it has not been. So there's a lot of legitimate concerns. And I would imagine there are many individuals who received the first 2 shots are going to have some more questions, as it relates to them now being told that they have to receive a booster shot to support, the first 2. But we'll keep apprised. My prayers and hope is that there are no negative effects, long-term effects of the vaccine, that there are no negative long-term effects over receiving a booster shot. Now they put more of this mRNA vaccine into people's body. My concern is that, it is a success, but we have to keep our eyes open, and we have to be honest with the information. And we call on government officials, as well as Fauci, who I really don't trust, to be forthcoming with all of the information, the good and the bad. Any closing comments, or that's it, Mike?
Yeah, I would just say that just be aware that all of these political decisions, it has to do with money and finance. It has to do with eugenicists that have decided there's too many people. And I believe that if they decide to start eliminating people, where better to start than Africa, the Caribbean, and also the Black community in North America.
Right, and Michael, you hit the nail on the head. When they talk about the depopulation of the planet Earth, they really talk about depopulating African and Latin Americans, or brown people from the planet Earth. There's been a fixation as it relates to this particular problem of COVID-19 to focus and concentrate on the African American community. I mean, I've never seen as many Black doctors on TV, on commercials in my entire life. I didn't even know we had that many Black doctors. Every time you turned around, a Black doctor is being interviewed and encouraging African Americans to take, the vaccine, and whether or not they're sincere or not, I've never seen this much. I've never seen as many Black athletes, as many Black artists. I'm like, where's the many Black preachers? I'm like, where are white preachers? Where the white athletes? Now, a lot of people don't know. Although when they talk about the coronavirus affecting the African American community disproportionately, they're always talking about percentages. The numbers of deaths in the United States so far, there's been 390,000 white people who've been killed by the COVID virus in America, about 101,000 Latinos, and about 90,000 African Americans. As I stated, 391,000 whites, 101,000 Latinos, and 90,000 Blacks have died. So whites are dying approximately almost 4 to 1. Yet you see this fixation on members of the African American community. And I know they talk about proportion to our population in America, that Africans have a greater chance of dying, but in hard numbers, which they very rarely talk about, they always talk about percentages. Everything they talk about coronavirus, that there's an increase, there's a 98% increase or a 2% increase in hospitalization or 1% increase in death. They never give you the hard numbers. The truth of the matter is more white people have died in America, and some will say because their population is greater. But I don't see, in my humble opinion, I don't see the reach out being equally distributed. The white athletes, the white actors, the white reverends, the white doctors, reaching out to members of the white community, to take this vaccine. So that raises an issue in the minds of a whole lot of people, that members of the African American community are being targeted. And, America doesn't have a history of being compassionate about concerns of African Americans, be it heart disease, be it cancer, be it
That's right.
diabetes, you know, be it what's the blood disease that African Americans have?
High blood pressure.
High blood pressure, but the other one about the cells, the
sickle cell anemia.
Sickle cell anemia. So we don't see the emphasis or the compassion that America and the medical industry has played in trying to find resolutions for these issues that we have so many times. So, you know, the messaging in and of itself, you know, gets many of us to scratch our head, you know. But be that as it may, we'll continue addressing that particular story. Michael, there's a forever going problem in the United States as it relates to real estate company, real estate agents who are African Americans showing up houses to clients, and neighbors or community individuals calling the police on them. We had the latest issue in Michigan where a real estate agent was legally showing a house to a customer, and someone called the police, and the police responded in an overly aggressive manner. Talk about that story, Mike.
Yes, Eric Brown. He was a Black real estate agent in Wyoming, Michigan. And he was showing to a potential buyer, he was showing the house, and he noticed from the second floor window, he was walking around the house, and on the second floor, he looked down and he saw police surrounding the entire building, rifles drawn, rifles trained on the building itself, aimed there. And he said to them that he's the real estate owner. He looked from the window, the second floor, and said to them, I'm a real estate agent, and I'm showing his client and his 15-year-old son this house that's for sale. Well, they demanded, the police with rifles aimed at the window, demanded that they come out of the building, single file, with their hands in the air, which they complied. They came down the stairs. They walked out single file, one at a time, had their hands up in the air. All of them were immediately handcuffed, including the 15-year-old little boy with his father. And obviously the 15-year-old was traumatized because he's never seen anything like that. So after that, he was able to show them what he told them from the window, that he's a real estate person. He showed them his credentials, and they took the cuffs off. And then in turn, when he was leaving, said that they were sorry. Now the police captain, Captain Timothy Pose, said that this had nothing to do with race, and they followed the protocols and the rules and regs of that department. He's saying that race wasn't a factor. Let me just tell you something from history. Anytime they say race wasn't a factor, race is a factor. Now, if the captain out of nowhere says race was not a factor, race was not a determinant in the actions taken on by the police officers, you mean if a white real estate agent was in an empty house on the second floor, and he was with a white person getting ready to buy a house, and a 15-year-old son, they would have had rifles trained on all three of them? I don't think so. And then they would not have made all of them come down, single file, one at a time, with their hands up, and then cuffed them.
Right.
They would have spoke to them like human beings and said, what's going on? You know, we just check in. There's been some recent B&Es in this area, so we were just checking. You know, it would have been like that. The rifles would no longer been drawn, or nothing like that if it was white people. But this is what you do. This is the response to Black people buying a house.
And this is also an opportunity for us to see the level of denial that exists in the minds of white chiefs, white commissioners who always provide excuses for police officers. Now, if a neighbor legitimately suspects that a burglary is occurring in a neighbor's house and they call the police, I have no problem with that. If police officers respond to a location that they heard a burglary in progress, and they respond to a location en masse sufficiently enough, I have no problem with that either. For police officers are experts and professionals. When you see that, when you make a call for someone to leave the house and you see that they're compliant, that they're not complying in a hostile manner, then everything should de-escalate. They explain to you they're a real estate agent. Okay, you see a for sale sign in the front yard, you know the house is for sale, fine. I have no problem with them furthering their investigation, but there's absolutely no reason for guns to be pointed, for people to be handcuffed. You go up to them after they explain they're real estate agents, you ask for their identification, you have their name now. So you know, even if they took off a flight and ran, you had to chase them, at least you know who they are. So that escalation, the level of aggression that it was shown by a police officer is not part of the protocol. It's not a part of our rules and regulations. The man is explaining that he's a real estate agent. Is it possible? Yes. House is for sale. Okay, you ask them to step outside. They step outside. They have their hands up. All right, so now there's a de-escalation. You see that there's some cooperation. You see that there's a possibility that this person could be a real estate. You see there's a young man there, you know. So this is not the first time this has happened to Black real estate agents. It's a trend. And the reason why we get so upset, because it's only a matter of time when you're going to have one of these police officers with an itchy finger discharge his weapon and hurt or kill somebody, and they're going to shrug it off to an excuse. You know, police officers are professionals. They should be professional in terms of evaluating what they're dealing with. So there's no reason to be that aggressive when you have people who are complying. And, you know, I understand in the minds of many police officers, you're guilty until proven innocent, when it really shouldn't be that way. And as you stated, Michael, we all know if this was a white real estate agent with white clients, then the level of aggression that the police officers manifested, it wouldn't have happened. We all know that. So the police commissioner to be so evasive as it relates to the reality of what we're seeing is why it's not going to stop.
No doubt.
Any closing comments on that?
No, I would just agree with you so much, because if one, like you said, that itchy finger, if one just pulls that trigger, now you're going to get compound shooting and everybody's going to shoot, and they'll just say it was a mistake later, because the police officer in question, when the guy Eric Brown was leaving, they apologized to him. But, you know, he felt that what we were saying, that had it been a white person, it would have been handled differently. And this is why the captain said what he said, that race was not a factor in the way the police officers acted.
And trust me, brothers and sisters, I know many of you, some of you may believe me, some of you may not believe me. White police officers get off by disrespecting African-American males like they do. I've seen it many times. They actually enjoy disrespecting Black men. Trust me. I want to real quick, before we talk about the last two issues, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the unfortunate earthquake that occurred in Haiti. A 7.2 earthquake hit Haiti, and about 1,200 people have died so far, and I think 5,000 injured. Our prayers and our hopes go out to the Haitian people and the Haitian government. And I also want to mention how it was, we had the opportunity to listen to Sister Martine Mousse, who is the wife of slain President Juvenal Mousse. We had the opportunity to hear her give her first interview. She was the survivor of the assassination attempt on her life and the assassination of her husband. And she said that while they were inside of her bedroom after they shot her, she heard them, they were looking for something. And they said, she heard them say, this is not it, this is not it, oh, here it is. And then the individuals in the room actually made a phone call and asked the person they were talking to describe the president. And once the description was given, she said they shot him cold-blooded. They thought she was dead. She, unfortunately, thank God she wasn't dead, she survived. But she said that she was also surprised that when she left, when she crawled out, that none of the security staff, now this is the president of a country, she said no one was there. All the security guards left their post. And her and her husband was the only one that was shot. So she raised a whole lot of questions about who was responsible for this, who organized it. She doesn't believe, even though there was about 26 individuals that were arrested, she don't believe that those individuals that were arrested were the engineers behind this particular event. And she calls for, further investigation. But I thought that was very interesting. Did you want to say anything about any of that, Michael?
Yes, I'll just, again, just say, certainly our prayers go out to Haiti And that to those, if you have the wherewithal and you could send to a responsible agency that the money will go directly to Haiti, if there are agencies like that out there and you're not just lining somebody's pockets, then you should give whatever you can to help Haiti, because it looked horrific and devastating what we saw. And I agree with you. I'm suspect, Noel, of any time that a prominent governmental figure is assassinated and there's no return fire from your security staff. How do you explain a person being killed and not one round was fired in his defense? So I'm suspicious of that from the outset before I even heard the words of his wife. Just to know that there was no return fire shows you that there was some compromise with respect to security.
And not only was there no return fire, but she said when she left her room that the security wasn't even there. No, they had abandoned that post, which is suspicious. Now, if that was it, you might say, okay, inside job, perhaps it's one of his Haitian competitors. But when you add to the fact that you had nationals come from Colombia, over 26, of them come from Colombia, of another nation, enter your country to participate in this assassination, that lets you know it's bigger, because these individuals had to be trained. They had to be, somebody financed them, so this is bigger. You don't hear too much about the investigation, so my suspicions are equal to that of our sister who thank God she survived. We only have a couple of minutes left, Michael. There was a story where a white show host made some derogatory comments about a Black guest. Michael.
Yeah, a white talk show host, Eamon Holmes, he compared Dr. Zoe Williams' hair to that of an alpaca. Alpaca is a sort of a llama, a beast of burden of the field. Compared her hair to that and said, wow, made comments like, it makes me want to pet it. Her hair, talking to a Black woman that's a doctor, she was invited to the show to talk about health, nutrition, and gardening, those sorts of things. And here he is making a mockery of, he claimed he was unaware that it was offensive and tweeted later that if I offended you, I'm sorry. If you offended, I mean, he regulated her hair and compared it to that of an animal. And so she did not, she just chuckled and said, I guess my hair's alpaca-ish. We got to learn to have an insult level. Thanks. So I'm not saying that she should have cursed him out on TV. I'm not suggesting that at all, but at least have the integrity and the dignity, the self-dignity, to at least correct him and to force him to apologize right there in front of the public that he made mockery of you in.
Exactly, and I totally agree. Michael, because we're closing, closing comments.
Yeah, real quickly, just want to say in closing, this is 8/21/1971, George Jackson made his transition. Jomo Kenyatta, 8/22/1978, and Huey P. Newton, 8/20/1989. We got to get better. We have to be aware of this vaccine. Big ups to the Irritated Genie and to Cynthia McKinney for all of your efforts in giving proper information to our people. Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
Hey, and as always, on behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our engineers, Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, and Brother Big D. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience. Knowledge is power. Don't forget, for those who ask us, what should we be doing as a community? We should be studying Marcus Garvey and what he attempted to do, because that is basically the only strategy that I see that is plausible. And don't forget, as it relates to COVID-19 and the vaccines, keep your ears and your eyes open, listen to the pros and cons, and make a decision that you think is in the best interest of your own self. We'll see you next Tuesday. Peace.